Welcome to Phonogenics 101, a Riotboy production hosted by Jeremy Gloff. The podcast where people who love music discuss albums track by track. Please hit subscribe, and if you'd like to support this podcast, patreon.com/Jeremy Gloff or Venmo @Jeremy Gloff. And now, on to the music. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Phonogenics 101. It is our final episode of 2024. I don't know how, but we have stayed on schedule. I'm totally a type A personality. I'm like, we're going to get these in there because I do not want to fall behind. But I won't be back until late January. But we are here with the Eurythmics family, with some crossover to the Blondie family. But now you're part of Eurythmics family. Once you're part of that family. We're a big blended family of music lovers here. Like I said, this is Phonogenics 101, not Room 101. Tonight we're talking... You like what I did there? We are talking about an album that is controversial in some ways in Eurythmics' discography. We'll get to discussing this, but is it a Eurythmics album? Is it not? Let's talk... I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, but I think we should talk about the soundtrack within the discography. But before we do that... I'm just going to call on you and just say where you're from and a little bit about yourself. Jimmy, we'll start with you.
Hi, yes, I'm Jimmy, and I live right outside Richmond, Virginia. I've been a Eurythmics fan since Sweet Dreams. I was introduced to the band and have followed them ever since.
Awesome. Next we have Mark.
Hey, I'm Mark. I'm from South Carolina, and I've been a fan since, again, Sweet Dreams. And also co-host another podcast, Eurythmics, the music and videos of Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox, very long title. You can find that on YouTube and on any platform. And I'm so glad that I can be offered a chance to be on this podcast. We're good in the podcast world with Eurythmics. We'll share it all that. So.
Yeah, and Mark,
listen to those as well.
Mark, you've had some real heavy... Dave Stewart's been on your podcast, right? And a lot of people that were on the albums.
Yeah, Dave Stewart's been on the podcast. Jonice Jameson, Jimmy Z. We've yet to get Annie Lennox, though. We've tried.
Well, maybe when her new album comes out, she'll want to promote it.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we'll see.
Share a little Annie with me, but you're number one. I'll be number two though, or three, wherever, 4 or 5. Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm from New Zealand, and I have been a fan since Sweet Dreams. I particularly focus on collecting. I have a massive collection of Eurythmics, Tourists, Annie Lennox, The Catch, the whole show. And I have a website. I'm a shameless plug. You can go to mikeseurythmicspage.com. There's no apostrophe, just MIKES, eurythmicspage.com. And you can always contact me there if you'd like to exchange, buy, or sell, or add to your collections. Hit me up. And yeah, Eurythmics, very happy to be part of the podcast series.
And I will say I spent many hours on Mike's website before I was your friend, so it's so cool to be your friend now. Sometimes I would sit there and gaze at the items that I'd hoped to find one day, or the ones I did find, and like, there's the picture, and I'm holding this in my hand. So a wonderful website. I love it. Thanks for all your work on that.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, and I'm just going in order in my titles. You may remember him from the Blondie Debbie Harry podcast, but he's joining Eurythmics family tonight. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I live just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been a Eurythmics fan since In the Garden, actually. I kind of got introduced to that by a friend in high school, and then Sweet Dreams came out, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is great. Same band, different sound. But yeah, just love them, have followed them. Like Mike, I've got stuff from The Catch, The Tourists, of course, all the Annie solo stuff, a lot of the Dave Stewart stuff as well.
All right.
Talk, Jim.
Yeah. I didn't realize Annie's Christmas album had a damn 10-year anniversary edition that I missed buying, so that's on the way on an Amazon truck somewhere. All right. And John.
Hi, John. I live outside of San Francisco, Bay Area, and I've been a fan since around Sweet Dreams time as well. Member of the fan club from probably end of '84, and a collector. So yeah, and I'm originally from Atlanta, so it's
Oh.
where I saw 1984 in a theater that may not even exist anymore. It was
Wow.
an art house cinema.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll have to put it in the chat. I'll let you know if it still exists or not.
Yeah. Oh, I fell in love with a guy that worked at a movie theater in Atlanta who died on the streets of San Francisco, by the way. So there. All
Oh
right.
my.
Well, continuing this morbid thread, we are talking about the album 1984. Shout out to Lynn and Jeffrey, who could not be with us tonight, but they did give me some notes to read in a little bit. And our friend Nick from the Fleetwood Mac family, now part of the Eurythmics family, is joining us any minute. So, I remember walking into Record Giant in my hometown in Phonogenics, New York, and that was the days before the internet, and there was just sitting. Where is it? This is the record store day version, but it's same record. This was sitting in the bin. I'm like, what the hell is this? A new Eurythmics album. I hadn't heard any of the songs. This is a different cover, isn't it, than the original album? But the inner sleeve's the same. But I just went home. I would have been 9 years old. It would have been 1984, so I would have been 9, almost 10. And I remember just playing the album, and it, even looking at the cover, look, there's this really grainy picture. It's interesting because the typography and the same kind of theme went through the artwork of previous Eurythmics albums in a way. But the music, like, I put it on, it was just so weird. So let's get this out of the way. Do you guys consider this official part of the discography or a side thing? How do you guys? Because I think of albums like Madonna, Unbreathless. We're forever trying to decide if that's part of her discography or not. But then, like, look at Prince, Purple Rain. No one would ever dispute that that's an official Prince album. So I feel like, where does this one fall for you guys?
It's an official album, absolutely, positively.
Agreed.
Definitely.
It's an official album that happens to be a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's intended to be, because at the bottom, at the top, there's the logo 1984, but down at the bottom, there's the rest of the title, For the Love of Big Brother.
Right.
So I think it's meant to be. I think they intended it to be.
Listening to it tonight, and I've listened to it for the last week or so, I kind of got the question: is it a soundtrack, or it's not a score? But is it a soundtrack? Were they treating it as a soundtrack when they were commissioned to make it? I wonder if they were actually watching the film as they were to get when people do scores or soundtracks, they'll have the film playing for inspiration and to know where they're gonna insert the parts and stuff. But I don't know that they ever watched it when they were recording.
I think I remember that was part of the discussion when the controversy with the producer came up. Didn't they say something like they sent us that they had been sent portions of the film?
Does anybody want to tell the audience
Sure.
a little bit of that story? I mean, I think some of us know it, but is anybody willing to share it? The director didn't realize Eurythmics were commissioned to do music. He had his own orchestral score. Even during an acceptance speech, he said, put down Eurythmics score, correct?
Right. Michael Radford, who was the director, the film's director. And but this Eurythmics were on RCA, but this was a Virgin release. And so who's the Virgin chief? What's his name? Oh gosh.
Branson.
Yeah.
He wanted a hit album to go along with this movie. And so he commissioned Eurythmics to do it. Who knows what it all was about, but was it just to get publicity? I don't think Dave and Annie thought so. At the time, I wouldn't have known, but you could have thought, okay, is this one of Dave's weird, eccentric things about, okay, we're going to get banned and that kind of thing. But the way they talk about it years and years later, even like the last 2 or 3 years, if they bring it up, Yeah, I don't think it wasn't planned on their part. So yeah, but eventually there's a DVD, Blu-ray or something that came out a few years ago, where you can listen to both soundtracks, the orchestral score and the Eurythmic score, or a version of both. I think, if I'm not, which is great. And you hear on that, if you haven't listened to that, if you haven't seen that, you hear tracks that are not Eurythmics tracks that are not on this soundtrack, or on this album rather, I should say. So there's some really wonderful music that we'd all love to have, that's out there in some vault somewhere. So we all need an expanded
definitive
anniversary.
version.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's
Anyway,
welcome.
who else would like to talk about that? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I would just like to add that I've heard some of the music and the Eurythmics music from the 1984 actual movie, and it's different. I mean, they didn't use any of the actual songs
Right.
from the album. They're like reinterpreted versions of like Julia and Ministry of Love, and and it's very unusual actually. I mean, I like it. I've heard it and it's multiple times, and I do like it. I think it adds a nice little touch to the rest of the album, but I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's welcome Nick to the podcast. Nick, do you want to just say hi and say where you're from and introduce yourself really quick?
Hello, I'm Nick. I'm from upstate New York, and that's pretty much it.
Well, we did talk about whether we consider this an official album, and I feel like there's no place in the world where Be Yourself Tonight is the follow-up to Touch. Like that just is never the way it is. This album is definitely the next step after Touch before Be Yourself Tonight, and it always will be in my mind. But when they did the boxed collection, of course, because of the different label, this was missing, and it's still not available on digital. The most recent release was the Record Store Day Orange vinyl, which came with a download. But do you think this album is going to be lost in time if it never is, released on digital?
I mean, at some point, perhaps. I don't know who still has the rights to it. If it's a Virgin Publishing, it seems like maybe, maybe if there's, enough. I don't know. Since they did the remaster in a couple of years ago, it must be up to, I don't know who has the deciding the decision. Is it Dave and Annie, or is it Virgin?
And I do hope that they'd love their, like, right now I'm in a project where I'm trying to get my discography right on Spotify, because early in the 2000s, when things transferred from hard copy to digital, there was a lot of mistakes in dates and metadata. So I had to repay for things to get released just to get the data correct. But I feel like when we all pass away, you want to leave your legacy, no matter how shitty it is or great, like Eurythmics. But I hope they care about their discography enough to say, we got to get this out there. We're not going to be here.
Is it available in the UK on streaming? Because it,
Yeah,
it is on.
Yeah.
Or what
Mike,
about
it's available in New Zealand streaming?
I'm not sure, Mark. I'm not sure. Yeah. I've already purchased it, so
right.
Haven't.
That's what I was wondering, if it's just another faux pas in the US.
Which, of course, Nick, am I guessing, did you listen to this on YouTube? Where did you find this?
Yeah, that was the method that I used.
Okay, so people can hear it on YouTube, I guess, if you can't find it on Spotify. So, we all know the story of 1984, Big Brother. It's a really dark movie. I feel like there's a lot of Eastern European vibes, a lot of shadows, a lot of just dank humanity. And I feel like here we are in 2024. It's very interesting to listen to this album in the context of murders and elections and blah, blah, blah. We won't get into politics, but
surveillance.
Yeah, surveillance, the eye watching you, mind control. That's a whole nother podcast. But let me just ask, though, did listening to this album hit anybody different in 2024 than maybe in 1984?
I mean, just having listened to it so recently over the last week and even tonight on the way home, I really like it. I mean, I don't think, it is an album unto itself. And, I kind of dare to say, like, it's kind of Eurythmics' jazz album in many ways. And there's also touches of it that sound like Touch, like second sided Touch.
Right.
Very uh, you know, evocative of that same feel.
I definitely feel like this was their exit out of the electronic, and we'll talk about Be Yourself tonight, next month. But listening to the album for the first time, there's not a lot of proper songs. There's a lot of soundscapes, a lot of some tribal stuff, a lot of experimental sounds. It's really dark. And I remember being scared of the album when I was 9 years old. Like, even the picture of like the Room 101 cage over his head. And I saw the movie. My parents were watching on HBO. I remember the scene where the prostitute, where he gets closer and closer and she's really old. And it scared me so much as a kid. So, any other thoughts on the general album or the album cover or anything before we go into the track by track?
Well, the album cover, when they remastered it for Record Store Day, Lawrence Stevens, who was their big designer, he didn't get to work on the original, and he didn't like it.
Oh.
He had to keep most of it the same, but the original designer took the I in Eurythmics and turned it upside down. He changed that in the remastered. And he added a star because he had made the star sort of eccentric to the Eurythmics design elements. So he added some touches to it. But he did say, he told us once in an interview that he would not have designed that cover the way it was. So it would have been very interesting to see what Lawrence Stevens would have done with this cover. But to answer your question, I don't, I don't listen to this album and think about George Orwell's novel necessarily, other than, that some of the lyrics are taken directly from but you're asking do I look at it in 2024 as the same? But, there's the appreciation of how much they took from Orwell's novel, and perhaps some of the movie screening that they did, if they had one at all. But I just look at it as more Eurythmics music. That's at this point, and appreciate very much how they took this, as they always seem to do, this project very seriously. Mm-hmm. And okay, we've been asked to do this, and we're going to take this very seriously. We're going to take this Orwell speak and use it throughout the album. Who else would have done that?
One of the interesting sort of the ironies of them recording an album for such a dark theme is that they recorded it in the Bahamas, I believe. I think it was Compass Point Studios, if I'm not mistaken, which is Island Records.
I walked to Compass Point Studios once from a cruise ship. It took me 8 hours round trip.
Oh my!
I'm like, I'm gonna get there, and I'm so lucky I didn't get kidnapped or killed. I didn't bring a wallet or anything. I just walked down this long road and it wasn't even there anymore. Really, it was just like a building that. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. I had to tell that story.
No, I just think that like when you listen to it, it's it's a film that's very cold and bleak, and but like they're recording it in this sort of sunny environment, and really listening to her vocals, I think it's one of the best albums where you can really hear her range, and kind of the depth of her vocals, because it really is like an exercise of her voice. And there's parts of it where it's like her voice just sounds really warm, despite the fact that the theme is very depressing.
Yeah. Oh, and to further on that, I'm always amazed, and I think she had, and still does, I'm sure, but and still at a fairly young age when they were doing this, had such confidence. I think it takes a lot of confidence to do the vocalizations that she's doing on a lot of her albums, but in particularly on this album, where her voice is an instrument. You know, the doobie, you know, all this stuff through Sex Crime and through some of the others. And I think that takes a lot of confidence that you can do something like that. And they both had that kind of confidence. They deserved it, and they were already famous at that point, but still, you know, early on.
Now, I always put Eurythmics albums in pairs, and we're going to pretend I didn't know about In the Garden until later, but I always put Sweet Dreams and Touch as kind of two things. Then I always put 1984 and Be Yourself Tonight together because they both had that really grainy front cover photo. They kind of use the same effect on the photos. And then I put Revenge and Savage together, and then even We Two Are One in Peace. So I always kind of paired this album with Be Yourself Tonight. And it's interesting they kind of use the same photo effect as on the album covers for both of them.
And the incredible thing is that Be Yourself Tonight comes out just a few months later than this. Mm-hmm. Again, you go back to these early days of Eurythmics. They had Sweet Dreams in 1984. Sweet Dreams and Touch recorded in 1983. Well, or released in 1983. You had Touch being this huge thing all the way through 1984. Then the 1984 For the Love of Big Brother album comes out. And then was it just in May of the next year will Be Yourself Tonight? That's an amazing amount of work in a short amount of time.
This came out in, I'm looking for the release date, 12th of November.
Oh, November?
Yep, November 12th, 1984, and then Be Yourself Tonight was April 29th. So can you imagine having these two albums? Like that's, and I remember hearing Would I Lie to You on the radio, which will be next month's podcast. But that's a real quick turnaround, and we all remember, for those of us that were there, that the 1984 album did not burn up the charts. I think I remember Sex Crime on MTV once.
So one thing that's interesting, I'm looking at the back cover, and it says music derived from Eurythmics' original score. So there is more to it. Which, like you said, Jim, that you can hear, and I remember hearing it in the film. There's music that is not in vocalizations that are not on this record, but they are in the film.
Has anyone seen the film more recently? Has it held up with time, or?
I bought a DVD of it like maybe 10 years ago, but I haven't watched it in a long time.
It's not a feel-good movie.
No.
That you want to just go back to and watch all the time. But it's not supposed to be.
Right.
And I mean, it's interesting too that, with it really has like a sort of a, the two lead actors, I mean, Richard Burton and John Hurt, it should have, I think maybe they were anticipating it being a bigger release because it's coinciding with the year of 1984, but it was also, the beginning of the Reagan era. And, a film like this probably was like, they didn't want it, widely, screened because it's so, I mean, it is a commentary.
But wasn't it? It was a hit in England and places. I mean, it just didn't do much here in the U.S. Am I right on that?
Yeah. Does anybody remember listening to this album and then listening to Tina Turner's cover of 1984 on Private Dancer of David Bowie? 1984. Nick, did you know about this album? Going into it, did you have any thoughts?
I didn't know about this album, but I have quite the soft spot for soundtrack albums.
Okay.
Peter Gabriel's Passion album, David Byrne's Catherine Wheel, those really hold up in their respective discographies. So I came in with relatively high expectations, and those were met.
Oh, all right. Well, any other thoughts before we go into the track by track?
Well, you mentioned Bowie and his 1984. Diamond Dogs was originally supposed to be, like, his stage show was supposed to be 1984, but he couldn't get the rights from George Orwell's, widow, who held the rights to. So that whole thing was supposed to be like a dystopian, concept.
All right.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the album opens with "I Did It Just the Same," which is a line that Winston used in the movie, correct? When he saw that the prostitute was much older than he thought, and he said, "I did it just the same." It's kind of a mid-tempo. Annie Lennox is kind of doing some scatting over it. She's a little bit tribal with her, like her voice is kind of a percussion instrument. And I remember putting on the album as a 9-year-old. I'm like, what is? I didn't understand it. Like, it's kind of a song, but it's kind of not. It's kind of a soundscape. It's an instrumental, but not. What do you guys think of this one?
Well, first, I was at first just going to say it was a complete mess because you can't understand the thing Annie's singing about.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, that's the whole point, is she's not really singing. And her voice, I think it is introducing us to her voice to be used as an instrument throughout the rest of the album. So I think that it serves as that introduction to that concept.
That makes a good point, Jimmy, because I was going to say that that track probably would not have been my choice to open the album, but your comment about it introducing to a lot of the other pieces on the album, that's actually, I never thought about it that way. So that's probably maybe a reason why they did that, used that instrumental scatty type song instead of something that was more, put together, like For the Love of Big Brother or Sex Crime or Julia, something like that.
Right. So you knew immediately that you were not getting a typical Eurythmics album, that there was going to be something different about this. I think that, so that's what I Did It Just the Same does for me, is it just kind of breaks the expectations of a conventional album.
It's definitely setting a mood, that's for sure.
Yes, the tone. I think it does set up the tone. Yes.
And it's interesting as the song progresses, Annie gets a little bit more aggressive in her vocals till the song ends with her just kind of popping off. There's some weird kind of backwards keyboard sounds. So let's go to Nick. What did you think of this jumping in the first song?
So two things come to mind initially. The first is the glass tink that you hear on the right channel. It pretty much permeates the entire song every 5 or 6 seconds. It's not annoying, but it's a cool presence. And then the second part is the really bouncy piano, also on the right channel. It's a good start to the album. I like it.
All right. Any other thoughts?
It ended up, am I right on this? The B-side to Sex Crime? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you bought the single, you got you got introduced to it as well.
Does anybody remember that scene where they're like the prostitute's sex worker, I guess is what we're supposed to say now, but it kind of zooms into her and then she's really pasty white and you can see her breath, and my mom's like, cover your eyes, but I could still see it. It was scary to me at 9 years old. Like the way it was filmed, it was very dark and very unsexual. Like it was kind of mortifying. All right. Any other thoughts? And I Did It Just the Same.
Yeah, it's a great opening. Yeah.
All right. Well, the second song was the single from the album. Jeffrey and Lynn both left notes that this song is like Love is a Stranger to them, that they can play it over and over again. They feel it's a classic. I remember I only saw it on MTV maybe once when I was a kid, and I was glued to MTV. But I remember being shocked that the word sex was in the song, because in 1984, that was not the norm. That you didn't. Even George Michael's "I Want Your Sex," which came out maybe 2-3 years later, society had changed a lot from 1984 to 1987. Would you guys agree as to what was the norm and what was acceptable?
Oh,
My understanding is that the song did not get a lot of play here in the States because it had the word sex in it. And which is sad because it's a really great song. And, you had other songs out at that time like Cyndi Lauper's She Bop. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Just because it says She Bop, I mean, everybody knew what that meant. But Eurythmics released a less provocative song with the word sex in it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we can't have that on radio here.
They should have called it bop crime.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, and I think it goes beyond just the use of the word sex, that it is sex crime, of course, and I think that was too much for U.S. radio. It would have been interesting, You mentioned George Michael a couple of years later, but then again, a man was singing about sex, and was that okay? Who knows? But I think the whole thing, sex, then sex crime, they didn't understand. I don't think radio understood it. You couldn't be an English teacher and say, "Oh, well, don't you understand? That's part of George Orwell's classic novel, 1984." It just wasn't going to work for that. But brilliantly done though.
Do you guys remember? Because this is the first time Annie didn't have the orange hair for me. She had that little bit longer blonde hair. And was she playing guitar in the video, or am I imagining things?
No, she plays the guitar.
Which reminded me of like Tina Turner, One of the Living, which might have been around the same year where Tina was playing the guitar.
Back here is Annie in the video.
Yeah.
There's Dave. But and Dave, they both were playing guitar. But yeah, I think that's the only time you see Annie playing the guitar. I don't think she's really playing the guitar.
So is that from John? Is that from the 1984 era right there?
This is the face from early January of '85.
Okay.
So the film was released in October, or it was finished in October of '84. So it was released actually in December of '84, and apparently just in enough time to like qualify for, awards and stuff, the next year. So this is around the same time, because of like the, when they were probably making the videos for sex crime.
And I feel like even in our modern era, like we can talk about WAP, like what ifs, pussy, like we can talk about sex, but I think even a song about sex crimes is something like that I think we still don't, maybe are still uncomfortable with as a society.
But hadn't Pat Benatar already put out Sex as a
Sex
Weapon?
as a Weapon. That wasn't until 87, Seven the Hard Way.
Oh, was it? It was that? Okay, I was wondering where, and then Berlin.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering where we fall in the chronological order of those sex in the title of the song.
Berlin was before.
That was 81, 82, right?
Yeah, Pleasure Victim album. And that did not go over well, that song. I mean, it did in the clubs and probably outside the United States, but not on the radio here.
Yeah.
But doesn't Terry Nunn in that song say, like, I'm a slut?
Yep.
And I think it's easier for America to understand a woman saying she's a slut than for them to be talking about sex crimes.
Like, Annie there was an interview with them or an article in Rolling Stone about them kind of getting burned on it. And I remember her kind of to paraphrase her saying, like it was kind of weird or ironic, that their song is kind of banned from radio effectively in the US, but Prince is practically having an orgasm on his record.
I think it's the coupling of sex and crime. That is kind of really controversial. When you're not only are you saying sex, you're saying crime. So it's like up in the provocative ante, so to speak.
And I think it's just uncomfortable. Like it's uncomfortable.
I think it's still, if it has the same power today, the coupling of those words as it did then. I think this song holds up remarkably well for what it's intended to do. I think it did it then, and I think it does it today.
They opened the Revenge tour with Sex Crime when the Curtain had a big zipper, which was sort of like her Missionary Man outfit.
Okay.
And I think it was a great opener for the tour, for the concert.
And that's what Lynn said in her notes, that was the best opener she ever saw of a concert ever. Jimmy, wouldn't you say that Sex as a Weapon kind of didn't get any radio airplay either?
Mm-mm.
And it might have been because it wasn't that great of a song. But I love Pat. I'm a big Pat fan. Nick, did you know this song before hearing this album?
I was unfamiliar with it, but I did read Orwell's 1984 novel a few years ago, so I was familiar with the terminology. It's part of Newspeak. You don't need to know much about it, but I mean, there were a few things in 1984 related to the novel. I think on New Year's Day, I think his name is Namjoon Pike, he had this video installation, and he had a bunch of musical artists, do this broadcast from their own homes, and they submitted some works related to Orwell's 1984. I don't think Eurythmics participated in it, but a lot of musicians try to capitalize on 1984 to a great extent. And we were talking about how this song did not go over well in the United States. I was looking at the chart history elsewhere. It pretty much was a top 20 hit everywhere except the United States, even hit number 18 in Canada, which is a little bit unusual. So those audiences found it to be worthwhile, but the broadcasters here were a bit too prudish.
But I love Eddie's vocals in this one because it's like it shows such restraint. It's like there's an underlying anger or tension in her voice, and it's very controlled. Her singing throughout. I think it's a very interesting choice. You know, it's like there's you understand there's a power behind the vocals, and she's just really controlling, like rage or something.
I think you would have listened to this too and wondered if they could ever reproduce it live. And that's the just amazing thing. That live version is killer. It's so good. I mean, they did it so well. But you kind of would listen to this kind of song and think, how would they reproduce this live? And they absolutely did. I should go back to what Nick was saying. I read 1984 for class. It was assigned at the same time that this came out for me in school, and man, did this album help me understand that. Wow. And I had the teacher actually say something, because you had to give a report, and she talked about how well I did in that report. Now let me tell you, I did well in that report because of Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox, and that's the absolute truth, because I understood the book. I mean, the book was fantastic, but you really could understand what was happening so much better because of that. You know, and they could have done a song called, there is the part of his Orwell's Newspeak is, there's thought crime as well. Thought crime. Doesn't quite have the same effect as sex crime now, does it?
It's interesting. You think of the 1984 musical landscape, because that's when Madonna was kind of finishing up her singles from Like a Virgin, right? At the end of 84. Purple Rain was kind of segueing into Around the World in a Day in early 1985. So it was an interesting time for music.
I mean, we only a couple of years before we had Prince doing 1999, which is in effect kind of a, you know, I mean, it's a pop album, a pop soul album, but it's also, you know, the song 1999 is very much a dystopian.
Right. And there's some pretty dark songs on that album. Like Automatic, Something in the Water Does Not Compute. And this is one of the earlier uses of a sampler, right? The XXX, which sounds a little dated now, but at the time it was innovative.
Oh, that's a funny thing. There's is it Neil Tennant with the Pet Shop Boys? Am I right on that? Neil Tennant?
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
He was a writer for Smash Hits back in the day before he came out. He reviewed this single, and he complained about the opening sex, crime, whatever, you know, and said it was talking about the repeating. I don't know. Just a few years later, what have I done? Anyway, just saying.
Yeah, Neil.
Don't be talking bad about my Pet Shop Boys now.
Oh, I love Pet Shop Boys. I love Pet Shop Boys, but hey, come on. Using his words, but we should say there's a really, really good extended remix of this song.
Yes.
Which got to number 2 in the U.S. Got to number 2 in the U.S.
And I feel like somewhere in my collection back there, I'm too lazy to look for it, but I have the 3-inch single. Like, didn't they come out with a mini single? Yeah. I have that. Yeah. It had a white cover, right?
Yeah.
There's two versions of this 3-inch, because one of them has Eurythmics. It has Sweet Dreams 12-inch mix, which was the first time that was on CD single.
All right. Well, anything else on sex crime? Mike, do you have anything to show from the archives yet?
Yeah, I do. First of all, in terms of chart success, Sex Crime was quite a big hit here in New Zealand. As I recall, I could be wrong, it might have peaked at number 5 on the chart, but it was definitely a top 10 hit. So And the whole shock value, it just didn't hit here. We were like, oh, whatever, you know. And when I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's straight out of the book. That's so cool. This is Eurythmics really understanding the novel and applying it to their soundtrack. And it was really no big deal. So I couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. Collectible stuff. I've got this. You've all seen this a million times. It's the 12-inch picture disc.
Yours is nice, and mine is like oxidized. A lot of them.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
The record.
But, yep.
A lot of them have turned brown.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So Sex Crime was issued also in this really cool promo pack, which was presented as a Academy Award nomination information pack.
Wow.
So that comes like this, and inside you've got these really cool photos that contain scenes from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a series of photos there. And these are beautiful. They're not copies, they're like original photos. So that's quite fun.
Wow.
The other thing that it comes with is a biography of everyone in the movie, the producers, the directors, and there's a 3-page bio on Eurythmics as well, which is really great. And of course, then there's the promo single, which is no different from the standard release. I did it just the same on the B side. So that's a cool little thing, and I'm really.
That. Ever seen that is so cool.
It is really cool. Yeah. So
even all the visuals from the whole project are just bleak. It just has a vibe to it.
Very bleak, but
I like their logo with the upside down eye. And,
Yeah.
you know, I like that they were, you know, kind of redid the Lawrence Stevens font, but I also did like that, you know, because it kind of, you know, it looked like it was something new for them, you know.
Yeah.
And I like that they play with their, you know, their logos.
Yep. So that's all. Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on Sex Crime?
I don't know if I've said this on a previous podcast. It might have been one of ours. I will say, by the way, we did on my other podcast. We did a 1984 podcast. It's our biggest podcast by far.
Oh.
I mean, there's a huge amount of people who are so fascinated by this album, and that it's a huge. It's so it'll be interesting to see what this does too. But I have this vivid memory.
Squeaking in at 10 plays. Phonogenics 101.
Yeah. But I have this vivid memory. There was a record store called Record Bar in one of our local malls, and it had a deck where there was a DJ, and he knew I liked Eurythmics, and he ran up to me and showed me the 12-inch when I came in, and he was playing it, and I mean loud. And he was running up and down the sort of the upstairs of the clapping the entire time. I mean, he was also a DJ in local clubs, I think, at the time. But he loved this song, and he played it loud in the mall. He was not worried about anybody listening to this. He was not a radio snob. But it is interesting. It was 40 years ago this week where Sex Crime fell in its third week on the chart. It debuted at 86. It went up to 81 the second week and dropped to 84 the third week. Just bizarre. I mean, it just. Oh, and I also play. I was in charge of music for our basketball games at the high school. I played this in the gym with 500 people in attendance, and I had a friend go, "I can't believe you're playing that." And I was so, you know, like, what? It's just, no one said a single thing. And I look back on it and think, man, you could have gotten yourself expelled from school. Nobody said anything. Anyway, that's my story.
I also have a story about walking to a club and a DJ showing me his 12-inch, but we'll save that for a different podcast.
Mark, you just took me down memory lane when you talked about Record Bar, because I loved Record Bar. Oh my gosh! Every Tuesday I was there, you know, on release day, and
We had them in Atlanta too. At the,
Yeah.
I think it was, that's probably where I bought the 7-inch or the single for Sex Crime, and I remember that's where I got What I Lied to You as well when it was first released.
Did they call it Record Bah in New England? All right. Any other thoughts on Sex Crime before we move on to yet another bleak track? and another. Okay. Next. The third track is another one of the only proper songs on the album with I guess a verse and kind of a chorus, but there's some synthesized sitar in there, some tribal drum beats coming in. Annie doing her vocals is like the ghost of a soul, long tortured in purgatory. This is a fucking terrifying album. But
I love this song.
I love the song too. For the love of Big Brother.
Yeah, this song should have been a single release, I think, because it had every element in there. It had a good hook. It had, but it was kind of spooky. I loved her voice. It was very wispy and breathy, and it almost flat, intentionally kind of a flat sound to it. And yeah, this why this was not released as a single is a travesty, because this is a great song.
I feel like some of the background vocals are kind of reminiscent of what happened on Touch, where she used
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this song also kind of gives us a kind of a precursor of what's coming with "Be Yourself Tonight."
It's a bridge.
It kind of has a very similar tone to it. So.
They performed it on the second leg of the Touch tour in the U.S. I have a cassette with where they performed For the Love of Big Brother, and they also did cover of Heard It Through the Grapevine on that tour.
Yeah.
If you've not heard their, what I'm assuming is an early version of it that they did live. It's a totally different.
It didn't come across that well live, though, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was, and they never say what the song is called, because my guess is that I think the folks who did the bootlegs of it called it "Yeah Yeah" because the background singers, yeah.
The Croquettes.
The Croquettes, yes. So, but Annie just said at the beginning of it, she says, "We're going to perform a new song now. It starts on the piano, right?" And then it starts. But interesting. And so, was that a song they clearly already had written? And then did they say, okay, let's change this up and use it for this soundtrack? So interesting. Would love to know from Dave and Annie, like the details of that.
Although, since they did it live on the second leg of the tour, they were probably already working on the score.
Yeah.
Because that was like a summer to fall tour.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that live. Do you think that's something I could find on YouTube?
I think you can. I'll try to find it and put it in the chat.
Okay.
And it's a lot different than the album version here? How is it different?
Oh, it's very peppy.
Oh.
Yeah, totally different. Completely and utterly different. But if you going back to the soundtrack where you can hear the piano in For the Love of Big Brother, you hear the piano pieces a lot in those alternative pieces that's used in the film, and it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Well, Nick, what did you think of this song?
I'll echo a lot of the same sentiments uttered here, in that it's one of my favorites on the album, and it could be one of my favorite Eurythmic tracks thus far that I've listened to. It's a very laid-back vibe. I love the processed sitar. The piano solo is really cool, trenched in a lot of reverb. I just wish it was on streaming services.
Yeah.
So I could listen to it even more.
Yeah, I like the contrast of the vocals from Sex Crime. That was so it was like she was so restrained, and then she's so languid on this track. It's so easygoing, relaxed vocals. I love the transition, between the two, and I just think I love the percussion at the end of it that really sets up, again, what we're going to hear more of throughout the album.
Now, I may be making myself sound very ignorant on this podcast, but even though the Orwellian universe doesn't really have a time or place, right? I'd still get a lot of like Eastern European vibes here. Is that accurate to anybody else? Has anyone ever been to East Germany here?
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, even if you're thinking about the film, it is very evocative of like, you know, Eastern Bloc Europe, where people are sort of crammed into these mass, you know, like dwellings. And
Brick.
I mean, the book itself, he arbitrarily picked the title 1984 by just reversing the year that he wrote it, which is 1948.
Okay.
So it was supposed, you know, it could be any time in the future. I mean, it is very, you know, yeah, it is very fitting and evocative of like, you know, a totalitarian state.
And to me, that's just an ultimate terror. Like, that's just terrifying.
And the song, to me, I mean, really just listening to it even closer, you know, you know, it's a melancholy song. I mean, the lyrics are very melancholy, and I love her vocals in it because it does sound sort of exhausted and exasperated, and you know, but there's also kind of a richness and warmth to her voice at the same time.
There's hope within the despair. Which I kind of feels like Eurythmics' place in my life in general. So, all right. Any other thoughts on "For the Love of Big Brother"?
I do love the lyrics. I'm so big on the lyrics, but it's a beautiful song, every piece of it. But I mean, the first part, like a train passing in a distance, which Annie's always sort of she's connected to the sound of trains. That's a theme in some of their songs. But you know, like a train passing in the distance, blackbird in flight, I hear you call. That's really good.
It's interesting too, because like, you know, there's elements of touch in here. There's elements of "Be Yourself Tonight," but could you picture this on any other Eurythmics album? I couldn't. I feel like this is this album, and they kind of do have a vibe for each album.
A version of it could have been on Touch.
Okay.
No, I see what you're saying, and it is. It's. They do have their albums are like that. They're their own little pieces, and they fit in their space. But I think you're right on that. Yeah. It could have been a single. I agree with that. It could have been a single.
Can you imagine a video for this? All right, Winston's Diary. Basically just a short soundscape. Is that a synthesized harmonica, or there's a synth pad in there? Nick, why don't you start out in this one? What'd you think of this?
It makes for wonderful background music. I really enjoy it, and what you characterized is mostly what you're hearing on the song.
It's just bleak, like it evokes really dark imagery for me.
Very lonely sounding.
And it is, you know, score versus soundtrack to me. It's, you know, they were writing it for, you know, the portion of the film.
Right.
Clearly.
There's an image on the back of the album cover. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, where's that?
Oh, yeah.
Winston just sitting alone right there in the little corner of his apartment, in the only place that the video screens could not see him. And he was hiding his diary in a hole in the wall. And that image always comes to my mind whenever I hear this piece of music. I cannot get that image out of my head because it's so desperately forlorn, like the human spirit just crushed into this little tiny little corner. And I always think of that. It's a very powerful image, very powerful indeed.
And not to be like a conspiracy theorist, but I never take my freedom for granted. Like the fact that I can go on Facebook right now and say how I fucking feel. Like I just put a post up saying like, because everyone's like, murder, we murdered this guy. I'm like, we can't celebrate murder of any kind.
Yeah.
Where are we going as a society? I'm sorry.
It's a
I won't bring my
very
personal
important
views.
document. The whole thing's a very important document and we shouldn't ignore it. But anyway, I'm digressing.
All right, I am too. Back to the album. Any other thoughts on Winston's Diary? All right, we are moving on to another upbeat, happy tune called "Greetings from a Dead Man." If you thought Winston's Diary was dark, this song is fucking terrifying. I remember just being in my bedroom at 9 years old. It was like the winter time. The tree branches are all like windy, hitting against the window. Like this is terrifying shit here. And but
Her, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just saying. I'll just say one thing.
Her
The
vocals
image-
are amazing on it, I think.
All I was gonna say is that the image, it definitely evokes images that are terrifying, and I'll shut up and you guys do all the talking.
It's 6 minutes. It's kind of a companion piece to Hannah Broomer, I think. This is the other song that sounds very touched to me.
Yeah, I think that this is again where we get the drums from "For the Love of Big Brother" make their return, in this track, and again, a very effective use of vocals as an instrument. I think this song really showcases that, and I feel like it's musically it's sparse. It's like when you really listen to it, it's not overwhelming layers of sound. It really is kind of like a sparse track itself, but I love the way she uses the vocals at the end of the song, where she kind of just really lets loose with the vocal, at the end.
All right, and Dave Stewart said in some interviews that he was going for an African tribal feel on some of these songs, right? That was one of the influences, and you definitely hear it in this song. Definitely, I did have a season of my life where I was frequently at the goth and industrial clubs, so there was definitely some, of that experimental dark electronica that even came more into the forefront during the 90s. So I feel like this album was ahead of its time in some ways with its experimentation and dark soundscapes. I think
that's one of the reasons why I caught onto this album so quickly, is because it was so different. I mean, every one of the albums up to this point were different. You had, In the Garden, which was, I wouldn't say punk, but it was more indie type music. And then you had Sweet Dreams, and then you had Touch, which was all electronic, and then you for the most part, and then now you've got this, and songs like Greetings from a Dead Man are the reason why that makes this album so much different from all the other ones, because it is a different sound for them, and they did it well.
Which Cure album was out in '84? Where was the Cure in their discography? Head on the Door?
Yeah, that would have been.
Because I'm trying to think of what dark electronica was out at that point. Like Skinny Puppy came later, right?
I mean, Bauhaus was still around in '84.
Throbbing Gristle.
They had broken up by then,
right? And they were Chris and Cozy, right? They went solo.
Yeah, and Chris and Cozy did they had a collaboration with Eurythmics, which wasn't released until '85.
Was that the Something Surprising or
Sweet
something?
Sweet Surprise.
Sweet Surprise, yes. Yeah.
It was first, they recorded it in '82, and then it wasn't, they were not allowed to use their name on it. So that's why the single that came out just has a silhouette of them on the back. But there's an '82 mix and then an '85 mix. But it was
I didn't realize there were two.
Yeah, and there's the '85 mix is has a lot of steel guitar in it. And I think the first time I heard of it was a cassette that came out with a magazine called Electronic Musician and Computer Sounds. It was the first time it was released publicly.
Don't you think part of it, does anyone else think it reminds you a little bit of the 1984 recordings in the sense of Annie or the vocalizations?
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I haven't listened to it in years.
Once again, I think of the soundscape of the year 1984, and one of my biggest albums that did come out in '83, I believe, but I discovered in '84 was Nina Hagen's Fearless album, which was from Germany. Any Hagen fans here, by any chance? Oh,
I've seen her a bunch of times.
Oh,
yeah.
I would do a series of every one of her albums if I could find enough people to do it. And so many of those aren't available digitally, like Street, which is one of my favorite albums of hers. But anyway, back to Greetings from a Dead Man. Nick, what did you think of this song?
Sounds kind of like a vampire dance party. I
Yeah.
get on with it.
Love that description.
Yeah.
That's great.
Which brings us back to the Castle nightclub in Tampa, which is basically a vampire dance party. So
Wait, so Tampa St. Pete, you guys had the Masquerade.
yes.
And then they opened the sister club up in Atlanta,
Yes, they did.
which is still around, although they've
Mhm.
moved. I mean, but the way I think of Florida in terms of, or at least that scene, like Miami had Warsaw, and Tampa St. Pete had the Masquerade. Was
Right.
like in M- Miami broke a lot of dance music, which is they still have the Winter Music Conference there, I think, but like the Masquerade would that's where like a lot of industrial and kind of dark wave bands like found their footing
Yeah, for
in
sure.
Florida, and then it kind of moved up the East Coast.
And the Castle, which opened on 98, 99. And if you watch those old goth talks on Saturday Night Live, they were broadcast from Tampa, Florida. So we still have a lot of those hanger-ons. When you go to the club, it's the same door person from 20 years ago. We're just all a little older.
It's not all sunshine.
It's not. No, it's not. We have a very dark underbelly here. All right. Any other thoughts on Greetings of a Dead Man? From a Dead Man? All right. Well, you flip over the album. Now, shit. This is probably the last proper song from the album, but fuck, what a song. Julia, man. This song, I consider the song in a league of its own. Like, right up there with Annie's Best. It's chilling. It's wintry. It's snowy. It's icy. It's terrifying but beautiful. What do you guys think of Julia? Am I giving it too much credit here? Or do
No,
gorgeous.
it is probably it's probably one of my favorite Eurythmics songs. It is so beautiful. It's I mean it's right up there with Miracle of Love. And you're right, it evokes a lot of emotion when you listen to it. Especially if you're listening to the longer version. There was I guess a single version release. It's like 4 minutes long, but the album version's almost 7 minutes, I think. And the instrumentation in it when Dave comes in with the guitar towards the end of it. I mean, it just has so many layers, and her vocals are just beautiful, and they have that kind of that chorus effect in the background. It's wow, I can't say enough about that song. I can listen to that one all day.
You're so right. Dave's guitar as it's in the closing minutes of it is absolutely gorgeous.
Mhm.
And she looks great in the video. The video is so fantastic. The overlaps of everything, and I think it got played maybe once on MTV or something. But
Now-
it's absolutely gorgeous.
I feel like the place that Julia takes you as a listener, that's kind of a place that maybe an artist takes you once in their career. Like it's a once in a lifetime thing. But Annie Lennox did it over and over. Like to me, Julia's right up there with Love Song for a Vampire as far as like
Yeah.
power and darkness. Like how many people will take you there multiple times like Annie does? And when you think of the pop landscape, I feel like this was ahead of the time because 1 year later you had Madonna's Lift a Towel, which had some of those similar synth kind of pads and scapes in it. It was a little bit more poppy, but it did have a similar dirge-like synthesizer quality.
And the version of the film, well, when the initial release in the US, like they played the full Julia during the closing credits. So that was like the only full song that you heard from the soundtrack in the film. But you had to wait till the closing credits to hear it.
Yeah.
There were touches of it during the actual scene where, they're making love in, outdoors. There's little tinges of the song that's played during that scene, just instrumentation.
I feel like there's a little harpsichord in there, some French horn. I don't know if it's probably synthesized, right? Or was it really a French horn player?
Well, it was just the two of them in
Yeah.
studio.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you're right. And did they ever do music with just the two of them again? They kind of went full band for the rest of their career, didn't they? Or maybe on Savage there was.
But
yeah.
even then, Ollie Romo was really working with the synth stuff.
Right.
But yeah, this is a gorgeous song. There's no doubt. It's absolutely, and it. I wish they'd performed it live. She actually, Annie at one of her events, sort of a music and talk event in England 3 or 4 years ago, probably right before COVID, and she sang just a little snippet of it.
Shit.
Just a little tiny snippet of it. But I would love for her to perform this live. And I don't even know if she thinks about it anymore. I don't know. I mean, I think it would. I think the crowd would go wild. I absolutely, positively do.
I would just die. And you
Sounds
think of
great just on piano or acoustic guitar with her voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think of Annie's like characters because you have like Belinda, Jennifer, Julia, Sylvia. I love her songs that are women.
Yeah, I want to make a playlist and call it "Who's That Girl" and then have all her female song titles.
Send that to me, Jimmy.
Yeah.
I will. I love this song. I mean, I love the way the icy vocal treatment in this song, of her vocals that are different from the previous tracks in which are more proper songs. This vocal treatment just sounds chilling to me, and it's so effective.
I feel like the frost is just dripping right off the song.
Yeah, it's beautifully icy.
Nick, what did you think of this one, having never heard it before, and then you hear Julia for the first time?
It's a super melancholic song, very immersive experience with the wall of synths, and I love Wall of Sound Productions. The synth pads are absolutely gorgeous. They sound dirgy. It's just a very magical composition. I'm glad that I've listened to it.
Yeah, no, not a drum to be found, right, in any of the tracks?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. A lot of it's a cappella. It's a tour de force, and what a testament to Annie Lennox's career that she can just forget about this song, because any other artist, this would be the feather in their cap, I feel like.
And the single, the 12-inch single, it's interesting because they say that it's the edited version, but it's still 6 minutes and 32 seconds.
Right.
Mike, you got some stuff to show us?
Yeah, nothing too.
The B-side is Ministry of Love, and it's extended at 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Oh.
Yeah.
Different version than the album.
Yeah. Lots of tribal in that.
So how long is that version? Like 7 minutes?
Ministry, it's like 5, isn't it?
Okay.
Over 5.
Actually, what's weird is I'm looking at it now, a 12-inch single, and the sleeve says Julia edited version 632, but the label says extended version 637, and then Ministry of Love says extended version 343, but the record says extended version 511.
Yeah.
So someone was asleep at the
Yeah.
And with Ministry of Love, that extended version, it's all like the last vocalization, whatever it is she's saying there, for like 2 minutes, and then it goes into the actual music of the song.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So, Mike, do you have the 12? I mean, the 7-inch from? Yeah. Oh, you got it there.
Yeah, I mean, this is really easy to find. It's nothing too rare. That's a little gatefold pop-up sleeve, and this is a scene from the movie where all the citizens engaged in a ritual called 2 Minutes Hate every single day, and here they all are chanting at the screen, but in this case it's the 7-inch picture disc.
Oh, picture disc. Wow.
So that's one side, and then there's the other side here. But I love this because it's a moment in the film and it's just so well done. It's really easy to find, but I just love it. Yeah.
That's a beautiful collectible.
Yeah. What's the B-side on that, Mike?
Ministry of Love.
Oh, okay.
But It's the shorter version, not the extended version.
But
Yeah.
what was the B-side to the US 7-inch for Julia? Does anybody remember?
Was it I Did It Just the Same Again?
No, Sex Crime edited version. It was called Sex Crime US Radio Edit, and it started with crime, not sex.
Oh,
Right.
Hilarious.
Oh, I never knew that.
Hilarious.
I must have a look.
Yes.
that's right up there with Britney Spears' "Work Bitch Edit." You better work.
Julia.
Yeah. So yeah,
Or-
US Radio
Oh,
Edit.
there it is. Yeah, sex crime edited version, USA 7-inch picture sleeve. Yeah, there it is.
Wow. I'm gonna have to get one of those.
And it
Theme
didn't
from
have
1984.
the copy that I bought in the record store. It didn't have a picture sleeve. It was just a plain.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
So
Oh.
the record company wasn't spending any money on it. So
well, this wasn't. Julia was not even released in Australia or New Zealand. Only the
Really?
UK. Yeah, which is
Wow.
crazy, right? Yeah.
And Julia was the second single from the album, but
Hmm.
Would I Lie to You was coming out in March. When did Julia get released? January 85?
January 7th, 1985. Yep.
And then, the lead single from the next album was only Around the Bend a couple months later. That's
Yeah.
wild.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. This is insane. The input, the output, rather,
Yeah.
that they had going on, and it was such good such good work that they were doing.
And I feel like you could think of Be Yourself Tonight as a reaction to 1984, like, oh, this didn't work, so let's go in a different direction. But it couldn't have been a reaction because it was already done probably before 1984 even came out. I mean, they were already well into recording it. It must have been in the mixing stages by the time this hit the shelf.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, Be Yourself Tonight, they were recording in Paris.
Yeah.
So they were already this was already in the past.
Right.
Them.
And look at them. They're in the Bahamas for one album and Paris for the next album. Hello. All right. Well, any other thoughts on Julia?
I was just looking at Discogs, and it's funny that the single was not released in, a major market like Australia or New Zealand, but it was released in Yugoslavia.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it was the first time it only reached 44 in England and broke their string of hits. But it says here what I looked up that it got to 17 in Ireland. But so odd. I wonder why it wasn't released in New Zealand and Australia.
I didn't even know about it being released as a single until the 90s when I started collecting seriously. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Crazy. Mm.
Maybe because it wasn't a hit in England, they didn't bother to do it. Who knows?
Or maybe Would I Lie to You sort of leapfrogged it and they just went with that. I don't know. Yeah.
Very interesting.
things just moved so fast in that year for so many artists. Because look at, not to bring up Madonna again, but she had the single "Some Like a Virgin," then she had Into the Groove from Desperately Seeking Susan, then Crazy for You from Vision Quest. All these things, like, Angel never got to chart because this and that. So, what a great time to be alive. Sorry, Nick. All right. Moving on. Double Plus Good. The tribal beats are back. We have Annie Lennox in the, what is it, double speak, or what was it called?
Newspeak.
Your attention, please. More chanty vocals, but a different vibe than anything that had been on the album thus far. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, for those of us from the Blondie world, I think this is the Eurythmics. This is Dragonfly by Blondie. This is like Eurythmics version of that song
With the beat from Orchard. With the beat of Orchard Club, though. With that tribal beat.
Right.
Yes.
But with the speaking, I think it is so effective in this track.
Hey, Jimmy, it was about as
imagined.
It was about as successful as the Hunter 2, wasn't it?
Not nice.
Continue. I'm sorry.
I agree with Jimmy. That's a
love
great
Dragonfly.
song.
I'm going to have to go listen to that and pair it up with Double Plus Good. I've never thought of that, but that's
That's
so good.
that is so good.
Yeah.
I
And
wonder if
only
you could do a mashup of those two.
Oh, that'd be great.
Really,
That would be
that
really
would be
good.
interesting.
Hmm.
and only 2 years apart too. Isn't it weird to think that the Hunter in 1984 only had 2 years between them? Because it feels like the world in '82 was so different than '84 because things, in a way, moved really fast in pop culture during that little era there.
I think Double Plus Good is also a fan favorite for people. It's a great track.
I wish there'd been a dance remix or something, just for the clubs, because this is such a. I can just imagine, this song in a club with Annie's vocals, the live word, and just. I just think it would be an incredible dance experience.
Jimmy, I see you in a full fucking leather outfit just walking on that dance floor when that beat
Double
starts.
plus good. I would be double plus good in it. Hells yes.
With the whip,
with your leather hat.
Yes.
The leather hat. Hell yes.
Absolutely.
Can we just all meet somewhere in the middle of the country and have our own dance party?
Right.
There you go. I like how this, Jimmy, you're right. I mean, this has got the music of it is so upbeat. I mean, it would be totally danceable in a club. I mean, if somebody were to take that, like your friend DD remixes or whatever.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and make a kind of a remix version of it. But yeah, I like this song a lot from this album. I mean, I hate that this album didn't do very well because there just are so many really good songs on it. Whether they're instrumental with her just scatting or a full fledged multiple part song. But and I have no idea what the hell she's saying, but it's still good.
Well, a lot of it is taken directly from the novel. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and which was supposed to be. I mean, it was supposed to be nonsense anyway. That just you tell the people whatever, and they're going to listen to it. Chocolate rectify. None of it's supposed to make sense, and that they took that and threw it into this song. I mean, and it works so incredibly well.
Well, that was Winston's job, was to create newspeak, to dumb down the language. So instead of having alive or dead, we had born or unborn, which Annie refers to in Sex Crime. There was no such thing as, oh, that sucks, this is horrible. It was just double plus ungood or double plus good. And it was dumbing down the language to a lack of words. And that was his job in the factory. So that's what it's referring to. It's a very, very intelligent album. Really, really good.
It really is.
My first and still ID for when I got on the internet in '96 is DBL Plus, which I still use.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
So first it was at packbell.net, which I still have that address, and now it's Yahoo, and I have a Gmail with it, the same one. So it was kind of my, like, when I was plugging in my dial-up modem, it was kind of my common. And my partner, he was like, "You brought the devil into the house" when I got a computer. So, it was kind of my commentary on, like, surveillance, and, we're basically, I used to say, like, we don't necessarily have telescreens like in the novel, although we do now, but now we're like carrying them around with us, like sort of voluntarily,
It's actually very scary. It's very scary.
It's very scary.
We learned nothing from this book. We learned nothing.
No. I was reading an article the other day about cars and how you have all the technology in the cars with all the cameras and stuff. How some companies sell your information, recordings of your voice from in your car to other companies for marketing purposes and things like that. It's just crazy. So if you don't want that, go buy a Subaru, because they rank the the least likely to do that.
I hate to say it, but like, and not being political, but like the fake news, like in 1984, talking about like newspeak and hyphenating or abridging everything. It's like in 1984, the whole storyline was like, the government was changing the stories, constantly. Like we're still at, this battle that's happening in some far off area. Like, people didn't even know. They were so cut off. They didn't know if, it was the truth or if it was, and the truth changed.
Yep.
And here we are in 2024. I read a recent review of the album. It said any icy synth band from the 80s could have done the soundtrack, but no one could have done it quite like the Eurythmics. And I agree that, we could have gotten an experimental synthesizer album from a number of bands, but I feel like the humanity that Annie brought is what really made it next level. I mean, within the constraints of the darkness and the tribal and the experimental, she brings a gorgeous, terrifying, beautiful humanity. And I think that's what makes it so special.
And there's a little bit of, light in Julia, when spring rejoices down the lane. There's what does Nick think of this song?
Yeah, what do you think of Double Plus Good?
I love the digitized frame drums quite a bit. It gives a nice jungle-like vibe. And if I had this on any sort of streaming service, I would play this in the car and sing along to it.
Got to get it on streaming.
Yeah, someone, if this podcast, yeah, those 11 listeners that are going to listen to this podcast, get this on streaming now.
Call to action.
I like the way in the song, where she's announcing, it's her voice as the announcer, like your attention.
Oh yeah.
And then towards the end, it becomes tension,
Yeah.
which is so much like the mood of the film,
Very.
and of the story. Like they're sort of walking on pins and needles, waiting for the for Big Brother to like barge in.
Yeah, they're counting down, right? 10, 9, 8, 10. And
Yeah.
she never gets.
10.
Yeah.
Picture it, Dave and Annie reunite and go on tour, and they open with a song. Your attention. Wouldn't that be some? Wouldn't you fucking die in your seat?
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts on Double Plus Good?
It's Double Plus Good.
Double Plus Good, yeah.
Continuing the mirthful, light theme of the album, Ministry of Love.
I love Ministry of Love.
Oh my god. Experimental synthesizers, more tribal vocals, dark. Let's start with Nick on this one. What do you think of Ministry of Love?
I need to try to remember the track first, so why don't you come back to me a little bit, and then we can
no problem.
go for it.
A lot of the vocals, Ministry of Love.
Yeah.
And this one had to scare you.
Yeah, it did.
Right? It's one of the other scary songs that you could play on Halloween.
I mean, there's not a lot to say. It's just it's a soundscape, but it's very, some arpeggiated synthesizers, which kind of called back to the other albums, but you just have those like really heavy drums. Annie just really, she's like guttural almost. She's just really going for it.
The chant at the end of it is that's a great word, Jimmy. The chant at the end of it's very menacing. I mean, it's almost you almost feel like you're being put under a spell or something listening to that.
Not a good spell, right?
No, not a good one.
Nope.
Like a human sacrifice kind of thing.
Yes. Like I would see this in American Horror Story or something. Hear this song in that.
Oh, I feel like it's just mind control. Like,
The chanting towards the sort of latter part of the song also very much reminds me of Touch, the flip side of Touch, with Paint a Rumor, the sort of like droney, chanting, hypnotic,
and even like in Aqua, No Fear, No Hate, there was a little bit of that too. That whole side too. Well, any other thoughts on Ministry of Love?
It's a very weird, wonky song. I'll just say that. I love the arpeggiated synthesizers, the battle cries from Annie.
We'll have to send Nick. We'll have to the extended version from the Julius.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, can you picture Dave and Annie just being alone in this room? I wonder if it was creepy to record this music. Because, I mean, music is a reflection of the mood and the vibe of a room. So I feel like they must have been channeling something here. This wasn't just, they weren't just clocking in and like, oh, let's make a dark song. Like, her vocals are really tapping into something really dark.
They took their assignment seriously. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even the next album where they kind of took a sharp turn, there's still some dark stuff on the next album, like Ball and Chain. I felt like was a descendant of this album. So I can't wait. I can't wait for next month, you guys. I love that album.
Yeah.
Okay, this last song is the one that scared the fucking shit out of me because the end, room 101, then it crashes. I was alone in my bedroom at 9 years old in the dark, like it scared the fuck out of me. And I was in that picture of him in room 101 with like the rats and that just really scared me. And you know what? As a person that's a little bit older, we won't say, even yes, my 50th birthday's coming up in a couple weeks, but it's still scary to me. This is a scary concept. We have Annie's, or is it Dave's vocals slowed down in the Aqua "Don't Touch Me" voice, but now talking about room 101.
Yeah.
It's the scariest. What do they say? It's the worst thing.
It's the worst thing in the world. Yeah, I love that. I love it. I'm surprised that you made it out of childhood. You were so petrified from this album.
It was just really dark, and it still is. Like, and you know what? I think those things shape you, though. I'm glad that I was exposed to that kind of darkness, and it stretches your human spirit to understand more. So I'm glad for this band and for this music.
And I love the way that the song just crashes to an end. You know, just boom, and the album, it's done.
Yeah, done. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the world's done. Like, I feel like the world's just done. Freedom is done.
Well, that could have been the intent too. I mean,
yeah. What did Nick think? I'm always curious what Nick thinks. Nick is
still listening.
He's
I am
listening.
still listening, and I'm grooving along to it. I love the part where the kick drum just starts in. The first minute or so is super ambient, free form, and then it just hits you. I love it.
Yeah.
And Annie's just going for it. Like, she's like wailing and shrilling, and
she's soaring.
It's interesting that the same woman who did this could do something as beautiful as, like, why? Like,
definitely.
How many years later? Like, she was so capable of evoking so many different parts of the human spirit and the mood.
And we should say Annie still says today that she loves what they did with the 1984. That she loves this album. She absolutely loves this album.
Does Dave talk about it at all?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think even when they did a kind of a retrospective when they were first nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and there's a great interview video. You can look it up on YouTube, and they talk a little bit about 1984, and it's in there where she says again, "I love 1984," you know, and so, which again, I'm so surprised that they've never again performed Sex Crime in concert beyond the Revenge tour because it was so damn good, and that they've never performed Julia live. And I think sometimes they think that, well, it wasn't a big hit, and so, you know, we need to do the hits. But they did great. They did a lot of songs like Jennifer and When the Day Goes Down, these songs at the very end of their concerts that were more calming. And I think Julia would have been a wonderful song to do that with, or just any time, really. I mean, but again, I'd love to have it, but.
Well, any other thoughts on Room 101 or the 1984 soundtrack altogether?
I mean, it's a bleak ending to a bleak movie about a bleak book. I mean,
so it all matches.
Bleak, bleak, bleak. That's about it.
There's no happy ending. No.
I don't know if I can think of another album where vocals are used as differently as they are on this. And like vocals used as an instrument.
Okay.
I can't think of, and I cannot think of anyone who would be able to do the variety of things that Annie does on this album. You
To
know,
me-
because she really channels different spirits almost in
Yeah.
this album. It's remarkable.
The only thing that comes to mind for me, it's a different thing, but Kate Bush, The Dreaming. I feel like she does a lot of different sounds in that one.
My favorite Kate Bush record.
You know, it's funny. I'm just now getting into her. I mean, I listened to pieces of Hounds of Love back in the day when Running Up the Hill came out in the mid '80s or whatever. But because of the Stranger Things thing, it kind of reintroduced me to her, and so I'm going back like into her catalog and discovering some other things. I'm like, wow, how did I miss this?
Have you gotten to The
during all
Dreaming
that
yet?
time? No, I have not.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Oh
I have
boy.
not. So,
All right.
It's a great record.
Oh. But that's apples and oranges to the 1984 soundtrack. Well, all right. I guess let's rank this album. Any other closing thoughts? If I interrupted anybody, because I just like to run my fucking mouth, I apologize, but I'm opening the floor for any other thoughts.
It just needs a expanded release. That's
yes.
Yeah.
And there is a huge fan base for this album again, and I think they found that when they released it for Record Store Day. I think that sold very, very well. And I don't know, I don't have any chart positions for that or anything, but you don't find it easily anymore. It's expensive if you find it. I'm actually surprised that Virgin hasn't capitalized on it a little bit.
Wouldn't you say
I
it's
think-
fair
I
to
think-
say? Oh, go ahead.
I think what they would find is that it has a far bigger fan base today than it did even then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really it does.
Do you think it's fair to say that this album has aged well too? I mean, some of it doesn't
Absolutely.
sound that dated.
Well, I think that's the thing. It hasn't. It's timeless. It
Mhm.
fits the mood of what it's supposed to do, and it's yeah.
Yeah,
No
I mean,
one-
I can
no
see
one else
this as
could
a
have done it.
soundtrack to a movie that's yet to be filmed.
Mm.
You know, it is timeless. It's not. I don't think it's dated at all. If anything, I think that we may hear more things in the future that sound like this album.
I mean, I think it's it's an album they should be really proud of, and I think it's unfortunate that they kind of got caught in the crossfire between the label and the
Right.
director. I mean, I don't know if they're like Virgin or whoever would release an expanded version is, it'd be nice as a fan, as a collector, to hear, the rest of the score that they produced. But, if they don't see unfortunately, if they don't see a profit in it, depending upon who's still, and I assume the rights are still with Virgin, at least for the rest of the world besides the US. But I mean, it would be great to have, the rest of it. And I'm actually planning on, I don't really buy DVDs anymore, but now that I can see that the Criterion Collection has both scores on it, I'm thinking about ordering a copy of it so I can watch the version that has more Eurythmics tracks in it.
Yeah,
So-
I definitely want to do that.
The album was Virgin in everywhere else in the world, but RCA in the United States. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Which I absolutely, we should say something about that. Again, RCA never ever knew what to do with Eurythmics in the US. Absolutely could not figure out what they were supposed to do. And so I'm not sure that part of the problem with 1984 in the US wasn't right smack dab on the record label. They just didn't know what to do with them, couldn't figure it out, and just moved on. But what other, I've said this before, but what other band could go through what they did? They had a controversy in England with the director. They had controversy with radio. These are the kind of things that kill bands, and that they're destroyed. But Do Yourself Tonight was such a strong album. They were so good there was Dave and Annie were so good. You know, these kind of things didn't. They just moved on. You know,
Yeah.
here's the next thing, and we're going to sound completely different than we sounded before and before and before, and it's what's kept them their music alive, because they didn't try to repeat the same thing over and over and over.
Would you guys agree, from those who lived at the time, though? But once "Would I Lie to You" came out, no one was even thinking about 1984.
Nope.
Like,
No,
It was gone.
it was gone. It was only like 3 or 4 months later, but that was such a huge impact and such a huge single that no one even thought about 1984. It was just completely wiped off.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys listen to XMU, but there are a lot of bands and songs out there that have this vibe to it. So it is, you know, Jimmy mentioned it's yet to be a movie, the movie's yet to be written or whatever. Bands are hearing this sound and bringing it forward again. At least indie bands are, and just listen. I mean, like there's a band out there called Cigarettes After Sex, very much like this sound on 1984.
I mean, there's a San Francisco based band, is it the Soft Kill, that released an entire EP, well, kind of a mini album of all covers of Eurythmics, including stuff from In the Garden, B-sides.
Oh, wow.
I think the only like hit they re-recorded was Love Is a Stranger.
Okay.
And it's a great record. It's a really good record. It's on
Soft Kill.
Yeah. And it's I think the label's Dark Entries, which is a local San Francisco based they do a lot of reissues of obscure dark wave from the 80s cassette only things. And they've also he's reissued all of the Patrick Cowley on our archived recordings that have never seen the light of day. But yeah, it's a really great tribute to, so clearly they do have their old material still has an effect.
All right, well, definitely a daring album. They had 2 blockbuster hit albums that were unconventional but conventional pop songwriting. And this album, to do an album that only had like 3 proper songs with a lot of soundscapes and instrumentals, was daring for a band at the time. So, what do you guys, Jimmy, I'll go last because you're always last. Let's start with Mark. Eurythmics 1984. Scale of 1 to 10.
10.
10. No hesitation. He's like, 10, bitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
10, bitch.
Perfect.
All right, Mike.
10. Absolutely.
10, bitch.
Yeah.
Jim, welcome to the Eurythmics family. Now you're a member forever. What do you rank the Eurythmics 1984 soundtrack? 10, bitch. He gave it a motherfucking 10. All right, John.
I think after re-listening to it so much in the last week, I'm going with a 10 just because I think her vocals are and the production are so great, and it's so underrated. And just interject, sorry, the band is not the Soft Kill, it's called Cold Beat.
Okay.
Cold Beat.
Cold Beat. DEAT. They did an album called A Simple Reflection, which is all Eurythmics covered.
Okay.
I can drop it in the chat later.
Yes,
Yeah, that'd be great.
Did not know about that.
All right, Nick, you've heard the album for the first time. You are 4 albums into this discography. What would you rank this album?
I will give this album a 19.84 out of 21, which is about a 9.4.
Oh. Not
Lord,
bad.
What did he just say?
A 19.84 out of 21.
A high ranking.
Yes.
All right, Jimmy, I'll go next so Jimmy can be the finale. You know what? 10, bitch. This album's a 10. Flawless from beginning to end. I couldn't change a note on it. I pull out this album, 1984, probably more than some of the later albums, to be honest with you. And more than some of any solo albums. So this is the one that I do go back to a lot. I love this album. This is the kind of music I like. Maybe a little too scary for me in some points. But I still give it a 10.
Excellent.
Jimmy.
Yeah, I thought long and hard about it, but yeah, for what they set out to do with this, it's a perfect 10. I think the album is a 10, definitely. I did do a resequencing that makes, I don't know that it necessarily improves it, but it gives it an alternate experience for the album. And I'll just go through the tracks as I put them together, just so it's a different experience. I don't know if it's better per se, but it's different. And it would start off with Sex Crime,
Okay.
For the Love of Big Brother, Greetings from a Dead Man, Double Plus Good, and that's the first side.
Okay.
Then Winston's Diary, I Did It Just the Same, Julia, Ministry of Love, and Room 101.
Oh, we're still ending with that terrifying ending.
Well, you have to end it with Room 101. I mean, that's the perfect ending. That's a perfect ending song of like just that crashing sound is thud. It's like that's the way you end an album.
That's the way you end my life because I'm almost had
Right.
a heart attack.
I think it's great. I think this album is wonderful. It's a 10, definitely for me.
Oh, well, gentlemen, what a great way to end off the year. Hopefully next year is not a year that replicates the 1984 novel, but we'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
We will see what happens. And thank you. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you all. This is one of the highlights of this year. I look forward to continuing with Be Yourself Tonight next year in January. It's all right. The podcast is coming back.
And Jeremy, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
It's coming up, right?
If anyone wants to fly down to Tampa January 11th, this is my 50 AF, the release of The Best of Jeremy Gloff Volume 2. I'm giving out a CD to anyone that comes to my party, so that'll be fun. Then I'm retiring and just doing podcasts because I'm a tired bitch. I'm just too tired.
I've been listening to some of your music, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
Yes, it's no, it's really good. It really is.
well, thank you. All right. Well, I'm a little shy, so we're just going to end. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thanks to the Patreons, some that are here. And thank you, David, Annie. Get this fucking shit on digital. We need it out there so Nick can listen to it and get those Spotify numbers up.
Yeah.
All right. Much love to your Eurythmics family. I will see you all next year. Bye.
Thank you.